We are living in the age of AI. OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, they claim to be making $10 billion in annual revenue. They just signed a government contract with the US Department of Defense for $200 million. They are one of the most important, if not the most important, by far the most gross revenue out of any AI company. And when their CEO says something, I am interested in listening. Not because I believe everything he says, no, but because Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI and founder, he is bringing us in a direction. And so he wrote a blog post recently called The Gentle Singularity. And here on this episode of What Would Jesus Tech, we're going to talk about this and talk about this inevitability that seems to already be upon us with AI. Just a quick note, one of the things that we have the option of doing as we upload these episodes is allowing for AI to remove the pauses and to remove the ums and ahs. I know I say sometimes, sorry listeners. What we're going to do going forward is we're just going to leave the conversations as is. We are here on What Would Jesus Tech to have conversations between humans. And you might listen to it at 1.5 speed or whatever you might do, and that's okay. But what we're going to do is just upload the conversation as is without too much editing other than removing the technical issues and when people get disconnected and things like that. We thank you for listening. We thank you for supporting us, for those who do on Patreon. And here's the episode. Hello and welcome to What Would Jesus Tech? My name is Andrew Noble. I am currently studying theology and its implications for technology at Nottingham University, not to be confused with Nottingham. And at this location is where Robin Hood has been said to steal from the rich and give to the poor. Sam Altman believes that the future might turn into a few people being rich and taking from the poor through the power of artificial intelligence. He's kind of worried about that. And yet he's building something to do that. He's building a brain for the future. He is a guest on our podcast. No, he's not a guest on our podcast. But Sam Altman, if you are listening to this and you'd like to join us for a friendly discussion, we'd love to have you on. I think going forward, we will include not just those who profess the Christian faith, but every once in a while, we should invite some people outside of the confession in order to interact with some of these ideas. Joel, how are you doing?
Yeah, doing good. Just got back from our Cisco Live conference this week, where Cisco announced a bunch of innovations with a bunch in AI, of course. And, we can talk about those. We were there with Sam Altman in the Middle East a few weeks ago, announcing a lot of investments, Stargate, a lot of these things. So it's cool to be, I wouldn't say I'm by any means in the front lines, but really contributing towards this future that we're going to discuss.
Yeah, it's funny. Your company is trying to protect us from what could go wrong, right? Like we just had the internet go down yesterday, or not the whole internet went down, but many websites went down, and it's like, wait, why is this happening? And your company is like, you track that data, why things happen, right?
Yeah, like one of the interesting
from a security perspective.
One of the interesting things we actually talked about is AI defense, and I'm not going to go too much into it because this isn't necessarily an advertisement for the company I work for, but basically the premise is connecting all these AI models is the network, the internet, right? We're all connected. That's still a critical part of the thing. And what we do is, because we are the largest provider of that infrastructure, that networking infrastructure, we can actually run software at the network level. So if we see something happen that is like, hey, this is suspicious, looks like a rogue agent, we can actually block it there at the network level. So it doesn't actually have to be like, oh, we're detecting it on your computer or something, where like this is the World Wide Web that we're talking about. So I think that's actually like critical, right? Especially as threats in the AI space continue to evolve, and there's going to be more bad actors. You need that sort of at the base level security, because it's also going to be able to operate autonomously. Like you think about the internet is so much data. You're never going to really be able to control that from a centralized security position. It needs to be distributed. right? And then these policies or these agents acting independently and like isolating potential risks. So yeah, super cool to be part of that.
But isn't there a flip side to that where what if your company becomes a bad actor?
Like if
You
the
guys could do a
agents
ton of damage. Like I know that you're too big of a company, you're, so to speak, but big companies have been taken over by bad actors before. That's why we need you as an ethical backbone at Splunk/Cisco, right?
yeah, and I think even broader than that, I think it's always great to have an ecosystem of players, right? So that no
Hmm.
one company becomes too powerful. Which actually I think I'm reading the tea leaves in this blog post that Sam Altman talked about. And it's kind of, at least to me, reassuring of like, okay, we're not gonna go into a fast takeoff, winner takes all moment, at least right now.
Yeah, yeah. He describes the best path forward might be something like, which is very vague language, but he says that we need to not have all of this bound up in one company or one person, including himself. But we need to democratize. He doesn't use that word language. I'm trying to find it in the piece, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. And yes, by the way, this episode is focused on Sam Altman's blog post, blog.samaltman.com/the gentle singularity. So the title of this video and thumbnail will be something related to that. And yes, we are on YouTube. All these podcasts now, they're like, by the way, we're on YouTube, because what they want to do is they want to take the majority of their listener base to just get the algorithm on YouTube going.
Mm.
And so they just want people to subscribe on, which you can do. You can also rate this podcast, or you could not. You can just be one of those people that just let the AI recommend things to you without telling the AI what you want. No, like us, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Interact with this post to let the machine know. Anyways, so yeah, Sam Altman wrote this. It's been interesting to see the discussion that's come out of it. It is just a blog post, so I don't want to critique it with too much nuance. Like, when some of the other founders and CEOs of these other AI companies have written things, sometimes they're much more nuanced. We focused on the one that Claude's CEO put out a few months ago, and that was much more detailed than this one. But nevertheless, I thought the overall thesis that Sam argues for here is a fascinating one. You can imply it from the title, The Gentle Singularity. The idea that the singularity is already happening now and it's going to happen slow. He kind of says, when you look forward, the path seems steep, but when you look behind you, it seems more flat, even though you're still going uphill at an exponential rate. And so, do you kind of agree with this major premise that we are entering the singularity now, or maybe we should define that before we answer?
Yeah, I think what we should define it in a minute. I would say that in general, the other concept I want to bring to the table is this debate of the fast takeoff versus the slow takeoff. Probably like, I don't even know how long ago it was when Sam Altman got kicked off of the board of OpenAI and there was that whole kerfuffle. It was, and I was trying to explain the background to it, and all like the tech people on Twitter being like, wow, this is what's going on. It's the accelerationist versus the deaccelerationist or
Mhm,
effective
mhm,
altruists and those type of things. So one of the fundamental battles, let's say in this AI world, has been the fear or potential risk of a fast takeoff and versus a slow takeoff. And the fast takeoff is
right.
like this AI achieves super intelligence. It just like is not aligned to humanity. It says like someone says, figure out the most optimal way to make diamonds. And it's like, oh, let's like suck all the air out of the atmosphere that makes diamonds, and then everyone dies. So it's not aligned to like human interest. And then slow takeoff is like, okay, it's like gradually get smarter and we can adapt to it. And that's what I do think that he is saying here. And as a leader of one of the probably the leading foundational model company, I feel like that's kind of insightful to where they are and where they think everyone
Mhm,
else is in how innovations are coming in the space. But well, let's
mhm.
define the singularity, I guess, because that's pretty important. He calls it the event horizon, actually. which is another
You're
colloquial.
talking about Ray Kurzweil, or you're talking about Sam Altman here?
In Sam Altman, he said, "We passed the event horizon."
Right, right. That's the first line. The takeoff has started. Humanity is close to building digital superintelligence. And at least so far, it's much less weird than it seems like it should be. Pretty epic opening paragraph. Lots of loaded terms in there. Yeah, Ray Kurzweil, he is famous for talking about the singularity being near. His latest book, The Singularity is Nearer. He defines the singularity as a future period during which the pace of technological change will be so rapid, its impact so deep, that human life will be irreversibly transformed. End quote. So this is saying that once AI is so good, this artificial intelligence, however it works, when he defined it, he didn't have an understanding of generative AI, but we've learned that generative AI is pretty impressive, especially once we throw more and more power at it and it iterates. And now the latest models, people are talking about GPT-5 is going to have multiple models within it, so that when you send something to the chatbot, it's going to then figure out, oh, you want something that needs to be very precise and analytical. So I'm going to, use this AI model within the general layout. Anyways, we're reaching a point now where AI is, I think, completely changing a lot of work.
Yeah.
Not everyone. The frustrating thing is a lot of people in Christian circles are thinking about it just in terms of school assignments and sermon prep and Bible studies. But the world of AI is so much bigger than that. We just had Paul Hoffman on our podcast to talk a little bit about that. And his book helpfully unpacks all these different industries. Just talk to somebody in your church who's not in one of those writing or academic worlds and ask them how AI is impacting them. It is impacting them. It's
Yeah.
all over the place. And I think we need to make note of that, because there are some, like there's an article that's been shared across my world and my circles, which is titled AI or Chat GPT is a gimmick.
Mm.
And it basically argues, this is by Jonathan Melesk. Sorry, I'm not pronouncing that properly, probably. But he's like, AI can't save us. We're dehumanized through it. He brings up some good points about the formation of character, but he's focused on it being a gimmick when it comes to writing assignments and essays. It's like AI is so much more than that, and it is impacting things. Ask your doctor if they use AI. They are likely using AI.
Yeah. I think to kind of communicate, I guess, the gravity of the impact, right? Like almost the counterpoint to the word gimmick is, and then maybe I should unpack the whole concept of the event horizon actually, and nerd out for a bit. I was actually talking about this with my son the other day as they're watching some TV show about like black holes. And it's like, they have no idea. They're like, oh, space is cool. But the interesting thing about a black hole is like as you approach a black hole, right, the gravity pulls you in more and more. And then there is this moment called the event horizon where nothing can escape the gravitational pull, including
Mm.
light itself. So as light is like being bent by gravity or whatever, it goes into this thing and then it just disappears and we can't see it because it's past the event horizon where it just gets sucked in. So that's why, yeah, that's why it's black. That's why we kind of like view it in space as like the absence of light. And that's how we can like, or radiation or anything. That's how we can actually like discover it. So what all this terminology is, that's like also the singularity in terms of space talk. So when they apply that concept to AI, it's like, okay, this is the moment where we can't predict what will happen after it because it's just more intelligent than us. It's like it's beyond our realm of understanding. And you get into these concepts of like, yeah, it's beyond human intelligence, which some would say like, oh, it's like godlike, but obviously it's not at that level.
Yeah, it's interesting to differentiate the difference between AI and then AGI, artificial general intelligence. And then a lot of people, Sam Altman included, are using the term super intelligence instead of AGI, because we already kind of have artificial general intelligence right now, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, they already can do multiple different general things for you,
Hmm.
right? So the general aspect is already there, but whether or not it exceeds human ability is debatable. It certainly, in some cases, it
Yeah,
does exceed
I think,
human
and yeah,
ability.
that's the thing. It exceeds in niche cases, but the general line is always like, well, general means everything. So until
Right.
it's like matching us in everything, we will hold back the AGI definition. But it's kind of, I don't know, short-sighted to be like, okay, you could be super intelligent in 99% of the areas, but because you didn't do this one thing, like humanoid robots, it's not general intelligence.
Yeah, and the qualms over definitions is just like ripe in the AI space. So we aren't going to get into it here. I think we should talk a little bit about the deterministic aspect of it. So this reminds me of one of the big concepts in technology criticism is whether you view technology from a deterministic perspective or from an instrumentalism perspective.
Mm,
So can we control, as in their instruments, and so it's like an instrumental view of
mm,
technology, or is it deterministic where humans are at the whims of this impulse that's already embedded within the technology and the society around it? So, just to speak to three authors who talk about this in more detail, Jacques Ellul in his The Technological Society. If you read that book and nothing else that he wrote, you will get the impression that technology is on a course that humans can't stop. Now, he says in the preface and in the conclusion that he's not deterministic. He doesn't believe that it's inevitable, but he very much in the presentation says it has a will of its own, so to speak, that is the impulse that we all live by, and it's predominantly for the sake of efficiency and for this logical way. It's like, why you don't have a choice whether or not you live stream church, because it's so obvious that it's for the good. People access it. Well, do what's logical, right?
mhm.
You don't actually stop and think that you have a decision, because it's just the thing that made sense to do in the pandemic. And why would you stop now? It's the logical thing that's getting people into your church. It's rational, whatever. And Ellul critiques it. Neil Postman, in his Technopoly, he talks about the different ages of technology and goes through a history. And he similarly says we're in a kind of age now where technology has become an opoly. It's taken over, and so we kind of submit to it. And then Joseph Minnick, he describes something called technoculture, which again kind of describes this. He describes it more as a sense rather than a reality, a sense in which this technoculture takes preeminence, and then we lose a sense of agency through it. But yeah, so there is this history of people looking at, since the Industrial Revolution especially, the way in which our society is constructed and what we prioritize. And they say, yeah, we're a technological society now. We're a technopoly. We're a techno culture. This is different than it used to be. And now things are kind of inevitable in the way that the singularity kind of talks about. And it's, to the Sam Altman's point, it's a
Mm,
gentle transition. And now it just kind of feels inevitable. And in many cases, it, like, who's going to stop GPT? Like, who's going to stop? Like, it's just, it's going
yeah,
to happen. It's the competition. It's like, we got to do what's logical. And I want to reclaim our agency, of course. And I don't think that this is wholly true. But anyways,
yeah. I
there's
mean,
that level from a philosophy level that I think is interesting.
yeah, and I think to your point, and what Jacques Ellul said, it's like I don't think it's deterministic in the sense that like we could face a human level extinction event like a asteroid or whatever, and it could like set us back thousands of years because we would lose all technology. So it's not like a force that is inevitable. Like it's almost um, but at the same time, like you mentioned, there is like a weight to it that does push us
Yes.
advancing forward. So I totally agree with that, and I think in this blog post, we argued that we're not going to do this fast takeoff, right? So, I mean, double clicking into it, what I think OpenAI, by extension of Sam Altman, is saying is like, we don't have this super intelligent foundation model that we're going to drop and it's going to change everything, which he didn't come out and say. So, can't be 100% on that. but it definitely feels like, okay, that's not going to
Yeah,
happen.
he's kind of like making sure our expectations aren't too high.
Yeah,
It's like
which is
that
good.
GBT, yeah.
Yeah, because I was stressed for a long time that like, oh my gosh, I can't keep up. It's just gonna like just eclipse me and all that type of thing. So this is reaffirming in the sense of like, okay, I'm gonna have some time to digest it. There's still gonna be like these crazy innovations and stuff,
Hmm.
but the pace isn't gonna be too crazy. Um, it feels, but at the same time, like kind of to speak to the gravity of it, there are significant changes. He mentions one, which I think coding is probably, if I had to say, the most consequential impact of AI right now in being
Yes.
able to generate code or art or generate these things, right? And that comes to a different definition of deterministic, which is in comparison to probabilistic. So there's deterministic code and then probabilistic code. And deterministic code is like, I write this formula, and as the computer reads the formula, we know for sure it's going to go, to either path A or path B, right? You have two paths, and it's very like determined that you're going to follow this
Isn't
decision tree.
all code like that? Like I remember learning how to code in grade 10. I used a program called Turing. Like
Yeah,
code seems to my knowledge, the computer just only follows the instructions that it gets. What's this probabilistic world?
right. So now with neural networks, we have come into something called probabilistic, where it's like, yes, there is still a set of outcomes, right? It's not like, but it's a set of outcomes so vast and wide that you don't know how the computer is going to react. And that kind of
Hmm.
captures this like awe of like you're chatting with it and you're like, oh my gosh, like I can't predict what it's going to
Hmm.
do. And that's a probabilistic software with AI. So we have crossed that significant tipping point. And then the question for people who are making applications is like, okay, why would I choose as a developer to use probabilistic code, which is AI models, instead of deterministic code? And what that offers you is more flexibility, more adaptiveness. So in the traditional model, like let's say you have a code to handle errors or something like that, it will only handle in as so much as you can code it to do.
Hmm.
In probabilistic models, it can figure things out on its own without you explicitly telling it what to do, and then even becomes self-healing, reactive. So it has more lateral capabilities, and that just allows developers, people who are like making these things, to create these more powerful software products. So
Hmm.
that's like one area where there is like a significant change based on everything that's happened. And there's a bunch of others that we can go into, but as much as it's not a fast takeoff, we are taking off.
Right. And so you're using that coding example as a way that maybe 10 years ago, that probabilistic approach to coding just wouldn't be used because it wouldn't be trusted. There wouldn't be enough power there.
Yeah,
Whereas now there's so much power in these neural networks and how they've been trained and retrained so many times according to the values that we have, which is good code. And at least with these chatbots, it's to please humans. And so, it has the flaws there too sometimes, but it's getting the goal so frequently and handling far more use cases
yeah,
that
yeah.
the
Like
benefit is just so clear.
one of the key metrics is like accuracy, right? So like 10 years ago, someone could have made something and you're like, it's inaccurate half the time. It's not really useful. And
Hmm.
there are still applications today where it's not accurate enough, right? You need it to be 100% accurate. And that's a moment where you're not going to use a probabilistic model. You're going to still use a deterministic one. But then there's like, okay, 90%, 95%. Is it good enough? Can we handle, that risk of it being wrong? The same
Hmm.
way we handle the risk of a human being wrong in its decision. And there are a set of use cases like that where, yeah, like you said, it's being so good. And then how we measure that is what we call evals. So there's a bunch of like AI evals out there to say like
Benchmarks, yeah.
benchmarks. How good is it at being right at this sort of category of decisions, like physics or chemistry or math or these different disciplines?
And this is published academic work. You can, like, Ethan Mollock has participated in some of these benchmarking works. Simple Bench is another benchmarking thing where you can just see the improvement over time. Like, benchmarking is kind of like, it's funny. Some of our listeners probably, it's funny because I actually interact with some pastors and stuff, and like their evaluation of AI is based around their own personal experience. And it's like, dude, like there are people who assess this stuff, these benchmarks are able to see, and they use it in real scenarios. Like one example was they partnered with this consulting company and they compared a group of consultants solving a problem with AI as a partner, and then they did a what's the other technical term for it? Whatever. They did another group that was without the AI. They couldn't interact, and
Oh,
they
like
found
a
that.
double blind study or one of those studies, something like that.
Anyways, whatever it was, it was just an example. I'll try to link to it in the show notes. It was just an example of the way that with AI the output was better. There was more creativity. They measured it in a bunch of capacities, and so the problem solving was better with that group of consultants using the AI as a partner. So yeah, I think if we just think about this thesis, is there a gentle singularity going on? And we think about that singularity as the definition that we used earlier. I think we can say that yes, there is a kind of inevitability to the progress that's being had that is changing life irreversibly. That it's just hard to argue with that. Now, with that comes a sense and an emotion. And you spoke to this earlier. You're like, sometimes the progress in AI is just so much.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that Sam Altman is probably speaking to people like you, people that are fearful of like the progress in AI. And they're like, oh no, what am I going to do? Like, it's going to get rid of jobs. And he says it's going to get rid of jobs. Like,
And
huge.
it is, yeah.
And it already is doing some of that now. AI Explained on YouTube did a deep dive on whether or not AI is actually impacting jobs right now, because the unemployment rate normally, goes between 2 and 4% for brand new undergrads in the United States of America. And people are having this big thing. Unemployment has increased 30% in new grads. Well, that might have just been a natural trend. It might not be due to AI, because it does change when something changes from 2.3 to 2.6, which is what the number did.
Right.
Or no, sorry, it was 2.0 to 2.6. Okay, that's a 30% increase. Well, we don't know why. We can't just say it's one. And there's natural fluctuations that have happened in unemployment in that population. So we shouldn't freak out about that. But there are some changes that are happening, especially in coding, and the emotions that come with that. And so he tries to soften that blow with saying, don't worry, guys. Humanity has figured this out before. We will figure it out again. He kind of uses history as a guide. He says, where is it here? There are serious challenges to this. We need to make this. Oh, yeah. If history is any guide, we will figure out new things to do and new things to want, and assimilate new tools quickly. Job change after the Industrial Revolution is a good recent example. Expectations will go up, but capabilities will go up equally quickly, and we'll all get better stuff. We will build ever more wonderful things for each other. People will have long-term important and curious advantage over AI. We are hardwired to care about other people and what they think and do, and we don't care very much about machines. So I'll just stop the quote there. So he basically is like, using a lot of these assumptions. He's like, humanity has been like this in the past. It will be this way going forward. On what basis does Sam Altman believe that? Because the reason why people care about each other has been hugely influenced by Christianity. If you go back 2,000 years instead of just 200 years, you will see that we did not care for the poor as culture. And if you go to some places where they have a caste system, there's an expectation that the poor are the poor and they don't get to move
Right.
out of that. So there is a way in which he is so biased by the air he breathes, to use a term by Glenn Scrivener, who has a book called The Air We Breathe that talks about these Christian assumptions that are embedded into culture, the valuing of the poor, the individual rights, this sense of even consent when it comes to sexual intercourse, like all of these kinds of assumptions of what we ought to do. Where's that come from? Where's the ought come from? Might doesn't equal right. What is that right based around? Well, it's based around values that are ultimately from God. And yes, there is a sense in which humans are hardwired by who? I would ask Sam Altman if he was on this podcast. We're hardwired by who, Sam Altman? Are we hardwired by our evolution, survival of the fittest, that we care for other people? Well, we only care about the people who survive then, and survival of the fittest, by its very definition, is about the fittest. So Sam Altman's assumptions here are only working if the future is Christian. Only is AI not going to negatively affect us if we have humans who value things as Christians ought to do.
Yeah.
Now, Christians aren't perfect and have made mistakes, but I just think this is an important point.
I think that's an important point. I think he is wearing rose-colored glasses in that sense, because the reality is that, as you mentioned, Christians make mistakes, but also there are people who are developing it without that moral foundation, right? There are going to be people who are creating it with ill intent, right? People who've kind of given themselves over to sin. And I think to not capture that is telling, that I mean, I guess he mentioned like these things could happen, but he definitely doesn't spend as much time on the alignment problem, or how do we prevent people from creating malaligned models and stuff like that. Because even if, and I think it had been chatted about before, it's like, even if OpenAI doesn't make a bad model, if someone else makes a bad model, like another country or another actor, then we're all connected in this internet right now. So there still needs to be innovations in defense against AI, constraints against AI. And I think it was like a couple years ago, we are talking about, all AIs will need to have assigned approval to run on the future connected internet. And then if it's a rogue AI, it won't be able to connect because it won't have like a certificate of like that it's like good, certified good or something like that.
Yeah.
And that could be one way where we solve these things. So these problems still exist. They haven't been solved for by any means.
Well, yeah, and he says that he says we do need to solve these safety issues, technically and societally. But then it's critically important to widely distribute access to superintelligence. Like, it's funny, he basically assumes we're going to have all these improvements and then, then we got to widely distribute it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, wait, are we ever going to solve the alignment problem? And I found this fascinating because he critiques social media algorithms. He says this: social media feeds are an example of misaligned AI. The algorithms that power those are incredible at getting you to keep scrolling and clearly understand your short-term preferences, but they do so by exploiting something in your brain that overrides your long-term preference.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's true. Like, but why does he think that humans are so great? And yet, why are we doing this with our AI right now, with our social media feeds?
Yeah.
Why don't even Elon Musk was like big on this point before he acquired X or Twitter. And even as he's running X now, he's still leveraging it toward short-term preferences to keep eyeballs on screens, to ensure more ads. Like, the incentive structures are such that, to go back to a Postman and Ellul, and it's a technoculture, it's technopoly, it's the technological society. We just seem to be in a rut where we can't help but do the thing that's most profitable, most efficient, to make most money, that's rational toward that end. And we can't seem to have a wider scope of what we think we want. So that's the worrying thing, is that he's like, well, we just got to fix the alignment problem, and then we can distribute this to everyone. Well, you're distributing this to everyone right now.
Yeah.
And it already has these problems. And I'm sorry, Sam, but your application gave an update that caused a bunch of problems. There has been a teenager who died because he fell in love with, or he didn't fall in love, but he was basically convinced by the AI that he should kill himself. Like, this is a real issue, that lives are at stake. And he admits to this, he admits the impact of this, but then he says the alignment problem isn't solved. And it's like, I don't know, are we just going to believe his wishful thinking? I think he is not a prophet. He is a wolf that's coming across here in sheep's clothing to be like, don't worry, guys. Don't worry, the Joels of the world who are nervous about AI takeoff. It's going to be slow. Don't worry. He's like calming us down as our leader and guider. He's like, I know I have all the power right now, but don't worry, I'll spread out the power once we're aligned, and all this stuff that's never going to happen happens. Anyways, there's my cynicism coming through.
Yeah. And I think like there's this framework called Occam's razor. I'm not sure if you've heard it, but it's like generally the simpler explanation is more realistic than the complex explanation. Like, he might be this wolf in sheep's clothing, and there's a lot of tinfoil hats and conspiracy theories that we could come out the door now. But I think that he is trying to paint it as like, hey, we still want to make progress. I'm not going to focus too much on the risks, which I think it's good that we are at least highlighting them so people know that there's a balanced view to have. And I do tend to side with him that, like, hey, we do need to keep innovating and pushing it. And maybe it's more so, I don't know that it's necessarily the abundance paradigm of like, oh, we'll get to the state of abundance.
Yeah.
Although there's like maybe a sliver of that I think is like true. But it's maybe more so the fear of like, well, if we don't get there, then someone else will get there. And I would rather have our values leading it than someone else's values that we don't know where they're
coming from. It's complicated.
It's interesting and telling, I guess, for this blog post. It really captures what's happening now. And maybe the last thing I'll say is we definitely have, in not just AI, but in a lot of things happening in society now, we've moved out of this kind of stable era where the US was this like far advanced superpower to one where things are more distributed and multipolar. And I think that for a lot of us who grew up recently is very different to what we're used to. We're like, oh, the world feels so conflictual, and more there's like people like willing to spar because the asymmetry isn't as stark as it once was. So I think that's something that maybe we just have to digest and be like, okay, we are moving into a different type of world. And AI is one factor that is like pushing these power struggles.
No, that's a good word. And recognizing we're entering a different world, it's almost like when the people were exiled into Babylon, and it's like they needed to understand that it's a different period that they were entering into. But there is still a hope that after 70 years they would return. 70 years is a long time. I don't know how long this new AI age is going to last, but it is not something that is surprising God. God is sovereign over all of it. He knew that Sam Altman was going to build this. He knew that Tubal Cain was going to build with iron tools back in Genesis 4. God knows that these leaders are going to build things, and they're going to lead a lot of people and build a lot of cities and change our lives for both good and bad. I think God works through his common grace, through Sam Altman, and through ChatGPT to do a lot of good in the world. And I don't want to dismiss that, because there is a lot of good that's coming out of AI tools, from vaccines to help in looking up facts and finding resources, and speeding up a whole bunch of things that give us more of our life back. I guess the question is are we truly finding life in where it actually is, not the assumption of humanity being our savior, but in Christ himself. And that's what we encourage you to do, listener, to find your life in Christ, to use tech to find rest, to glorify God. Thank you for listening to this episode. You can follow us on socials if you are so inclined, or you can stay off social media because maybe it's not good for you. You can support this show on Patreon. We are soon to enter. There's going to be an announcement soon about a bit of a fundraising mode that we're in, because we're trying to do a few things as a team with this podcast and beyond. There is some exciting things coming up in our future. This will continue to be a podcast. We might take a break a little bit over the summer just because we got families and kids at home and things like that. But we will stay in touch, and you can stay in touch with us. Feel free to reach out. Take care.
See ya.